The master bedroom in the Hargrove Mansion told a silent story. A story of peace interrupted, then extinguished. Elias Hargrove, the patriarch, found in his bed. His wife Sarah in hers. Their children, Emily and David, in their own rooms. All gone. And yet, this isn't just about a family tragically lost at 8 a.m. on October 27, 2023, when their housekeeper, Maria Sanchez, discovered the scene. It's about what wasn't there, what the initial report missed, what the silence conceals. Because the police, led by Detective Miles Corbin, found no signs of forced entry. None. This detail matters. Let me walk you through what happened. Maria Sanchez left the sprawling estate at 10:30 p.m. on October 26th. The Hargrove family was last seen alive then. 11 hours later, at 8 a.m., she returned and found them. Medical examiners would later confirm the cause of death for all four, multiple stab wounds. The time of death, estimated between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on October 27th. A narrow window. A precise, brutal act. But the absence of forced entry, that's where it gets strange. How does an intruder enter a fortified mansion, murder 4 people in their beds and leave without breaking a single lock or window? The evidence suggests something else entirely. It points to someone who didn't need to force their way in, someone who was perhaps already inside, or someone let in. Then there's the missing antique watch, Elias Hargrove's family heirloom, gone from his wrist. A curious detail. Not all valuables were taken, just this specific, highly recognizable piece. A trophy. Or a deliberate misdirection. The police report, issued shortly after, would highlight this theft, framing it as a potential robbery gone wrong. But the lack of forced entry contradicts this narrative immediately. It makes the robbery aspect seem performative. A narrative designed to fit a standard crime when this was anything but standard. The official story leaves this unexplained, and then, 3 days after the discovery, another piece of evidence surfaces, one that would deepen the mystery. A single high-end cigar butt with a distinctive gold band found in Elias Hargrove's office. Elias, a man known to detest cigars, a very specific brand, left behind. Why, and by whom? This is the part that raises questions. A disturbed scene. The crime scene itself, the Hargrove family mansion, presented an immediate contradiction. Detectives Miles Corbin and Lena Petrova arrived at 10 a.m. on October 27th, finding no signs of forced entry. This detail matters. A lack of forced entry implies one of two things: either the killer, or killers, knew the family and were welcomed inside, or they possessed a key. The medical examiner's report would later confirm the cause of death for Elias, Sarah, Emily, and David Hargrove as multiple stab wounds, with the time of death estimated between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on October 27th. This 2-hour window is crucial. It narrows down when the unthinkable occurred, but doesn't tell us how. What didn't add up immediately was the layout of the scene. Each family member was found in their own bed, seemingly murdered in their sleep. This suggests a calculated, silent approach by an intruder who moved through the expansive estate undetected. How did someone enter such a secure property, dispatch 4 people in separate rooms, and leave without a single trace of forced entry or struggle in the main living areas? It's almost as if the mansion itself remained undisturbed, despite the horror within its walls, except for one thing. Elias Hargrove's antique watch, a family heirloom, was missing. This wasn't just a brutal murder, it was also a robbery. Or was it a staged robbery? That detail would force detectives to consider a different kind of motive, one that went beyond simple violence. The first suspect. The crime scene, devoid of forced entry, immediately suggested a familiar hand. No shattered windows, no kicked-in doors, just the pristine, terrifying silence of a home violated from within. This detail matters. It pointed the investigation towards someone known to the Hargrove family, someone who wouldn't need to force their way in. And that's where the police found their first suspect, Robert Maxwell. Maxwell, Elias Hargrove's former business partner, had every reason to harbor immense resentment. He had just lost a substantial lawsuit against Hargrove, a legal battle that left him financially crippled. The tension between them was not a secret. Public threats had been made. Witnesses later confirmed Maxwell's fury, his volatile outbursts, his repeated vows of revenge against Elias. Such a clear public motive rarely presents itself in cases of this brutality. On October 30th, just 3 days after the murders, police identified Maxwell as a person of interest. The timeline shows detectives moving with speed, driven by the compelling narrative of a scorned partner. Was it too compelling? That's the question that should have been asked. Just 2 days later, on November 1st, Robert Maxwell was brought in for questioning. His demeanor was far from cooperative, aggressive, defiant, vehemently denying any involvement. He maintained he was nowhere near the Hargrove estate that night. The investigators, perhaps influenced by the weight of the motive, saw only confirmation of their suspicions in his anger. They had their man, or so they thought. But here's where the case file takes an unexpected turn. What Robert Maxwell presented next would dismantle the entire working theory, forcing the investigation back to square one. An impeccable alibi. The aggressive demeanor of Robert Maxwell, Elias Hargrove's disgruntled former business partner, initially painted a clear picture. Here was the motive. A substantial lawsuit lost, public threats made against Hargrove. He was, to the investigators, the prime suspect, the most obvious answer in a case screaming for one. Maxwell was brought in for questioning on November 1st, 2023. He vehemently denied any involvement in the murders, but his confrontational attitude only fueled suspicion. It felt like a solid lead, a narrative of revenge unfolding. Yet, less than 2 days later, this seemingly strong foundation began to crumble. That's where it gets strange. On November 2nd, the investigation hit a wall. Maxwell produced an alibi, an ironclad one. His lawyers presented security footage and witness testimonies from a high-profile charity gala he had attended the entire night of the murders. Multiple credible sources corroborated his presence from well before the estimated time of death, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. on October 27th, until the early hours of the following morning. The timeline didn't just bend, it broke completely. The man who had every reason to want Elias Hargrove dead simply couldn't have been at the mansion. He was 50 miles away, under the gaze of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras. This wasn't a small inconsistency. With Robert Maxwell eliminated, the neatly packaged revenge motive dissolved. The case, which had briefly seemed on the verge of resolution, was now back to square one. Perhaps even further back, because now, the absence of forced entry and the missing antique watch took on a new, more unsettling implication. If not a vengeful outsider, who then? And what did they truly want? The Hargrove legacy. The elimination of Robert Maxwell, Elias Hargrove's former business partner, stripped away the most obvious motive, revenge. It left a void, forcing detectives to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about the Hargrove killings. If it wasn't a personal vendetta, what remained? That's where the investigation turned inward, into the very thing Elias Hargrove valued above all else, his legacy. Hargrove Industries was not just a company, it was a sprawling empire built on real estate, investments, and an iron-fisted control over its assets. On November 5, 2023, just 3 days after Maxwell's alibi was confirmed, Detective Corbin received an anonymous tip. It wasn't about a scorned lover or a disgruntled employee seeking personal revenge. This tip whispered about something far more insidious, unusual financial activities within Hargrove Industries itself. The details were vague, a murmur of irregularities and unexplained transfers, but it was enough to shift focus from the Hargrove family's personal enemies to their professional dealings. This is where the paper trail began to diverge from the public persona. Elias Hargrove, the shrewd businessman, suddenly appeared less invincible. The documents reveal a different story, a delicate financial balance teetering on the edge. The official narrative had painted a picture of a successful, if ruthless, magnate. But the anonymous call suggested a hidden vulnerability. What didn't add up was the urgency in the caller's voice, a sense of fear, not just disclosure. This detail matters because it points not just to financial malfeasance, but to a potential threat directly tied to it. The initial police reports had focused on the absence of forced entry and the inside job theory. But this new lead expanded that inside to include the corporate structure, not just the family home itself. It raised a critical question. Was the murder a desperate act to silence someone about a financial secret? The evidence suggests that Detective Corbin and his team now had to sift through hundreds of corporate records, ledger entries, and financial statements. The hunt for a killer had now become a forensic audit, plunging them deep into the labyrinthine world of Hargrove Industries. It was a world Elias Hargrove had built, and now it was threatening to unravel the truth of his demise. A neighbor's account. The previous chapter left us with Arthur Jenkins' confession to embezzlement, a motive, yes, but not to murder. His denial of direct involvement in the killings pushed the investigation back. That meant refocusing on the Hargrove estate itself, specifically on anyone whose proximity might offer insight. This is where we encounter the neighbor. According to police records, a statement was taken from Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle, a longtime resident directly across from the Hargrove Mansion. Her account, while seemingly peripheral, reveals a critical lapse in the official timeline. Mrs. Periwinkle, known for her meticulous habits, reported seeing Elias Hargrove on his porch on the night of October 26th, precisely at 11:30 p.m. She was walking her dog, a routine she maintained nightly. This detail matters because it places Elias Hargrove awake and visible a full hour after Maria Sanchez, the housekeeper, stated he was tucked in for the night. Maria Sanchez's initial statement, as we reviewed, was that she saw the family last at 10:30 p.m., all seemingly preparing for bed. The medical examiner's report, however, estimates the time of death between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. But Mrs. Periwinkle's observation pushes Elias Hargrove's last confirmed sighting much later, to 11:30 p.m. That's a significant discrepancy. It suggests the Hargroves' evening unfolded differently than initially assumed. The official police narrative largely dismissed Mrs. Periwinkle's statement as a minor inconsistency, something attributable to an elderly neighbor's potentially faulty memory. But what if it wasn't? What if her observation, an hour later than the housekeeper's account, highlights a crucial overlooked window? It begs the question, what happened in that additional hour between Maria Sanchez leaving and Mrs. Periwinkle seeing Elias Hargrove? The police focused heavily on the lack of forced entry, pointing towards an inside job. Yet, if Hargrove was still up at 11:30 p.m., this could mean he let someone in, or perhaps someone was already inside. This isn't a small inconsistency. It's a potential crack in the foundation of the investigation. The timeline doesn't add up, not if we consider every single piece of evidence. And the true value of Mrs. Periwinkle's account lies not in what she saw Elias do, but in the time she saw him pushing the critical window of discovery much later into the night. The missing piece. Jenkins confessed to embezzling millions from Hargrove Industries, a financial scheme Elias Hargrove himself had discovered. But Jenkins denied the murders. He maintained his innocence on that front, and for a moment it seemed like the financial motive, while clear, didn't directly connect to the brutality of the crime. That's where the investigation needed to dig deeper into the overlooked details. The forensic analysis of Elias Hargrove's personal laptop, however, revealed something crucial, something nobody expected. Elias wasn't just tracking Jenkins' embezzlement. His recent searches included terms like offshore asset protection, tax haven vulnerabilities, and anonymous corporate structures. This wasn't the search history of a victim, it was the search history of someone actively investigating. Examining these records, it became clear Elias Hargrove had been building his own case, a parallel investigation into the broader financial architecture behind Jenkins' theft. And here's where it gets interesting. The laptop also contained encrypted files. Files that, once decrypted, detailed a much larger network. A network of shell companies and offshore accounts far beyond Jenkins' known capabilities. It suggested Jenkins was a pawn, not the kingpin. This network, this deeper level of fraud, began connecting to names that surfaced in the anonymous tip Corbin received earlier. Names that pointed to powerful individuals, connected not just to Hargrove Industries, but to a vast, shadowy financial world. The implications of this data were staggering. Elias Hargrove was about to expose something far bigger than a simple embezzlement scheme. He was about to reveal a systemic financial fraud. And the murder was not about stopping Jenkins, it was about silencing discovery of a larger truth. That detail matters, because it shifts the entire motive. Elias Hargrove wasn't just wealthy, he was dangerous to powerful people. And now, the question isn't if he was silenced, but who had the most to lose from his discoveries. This raises an important question. Who else was involved? Financial anomalies surface. The truth about the Hargroves' finances was far more sinister than anyone imagined, a meticulous paper trail leading directly to the man entrusted with their wealth. Arthur Jenkins. He had initially appeared cooperative, a picture of corporate discretion, but as detectives dug deeper into Hargrove Industries' accounts, Jenkins's composure began to fray. On November 5th, an anonymous tip had hinted at unusual financial activities. That detail mattered. It pulled the investigation away from personal vendettas, pushing it towards something cold, calculated, and devastatingly efficient. 3 days later, on November 8th, detectives questioned Jenkins. His visible nervousness, a slight tremor in his hands, eyes darting, was noted. Now, with warrants in hand, investigators began uncovering a series of large, unauthorized transfers. These weren't minor discrepancies. We're talking millions, siphoned from Hargrove Industries to an offshore account linked to a shell company. This was concrete evidence of financial wrongdoing, meticulously documented by Jenkins himself. Every transaction was a betrayal, every hidden number a lie. And it confirmed a motive far more powerful than simple revenge, a motive that could easily lead to murder. On November 15th, during a second grueling interview, Arthur Jenkins finally broke. He confessed to embezzling millions. Elias Hargrove, the shrewd real estate mogul, had discovered the scheme and threatened to expose him. Here's where it gets strange. Jenkins admitted to the theft but vehemently denied the murders. He maintained he fled the country the moment he realized Elias was onto him, leaving before the supposed discovery. But the time of death, between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on October 27th, coincided precisely with the time frame Elias Hargrove would have confronted Jenkins after discovering the financial bleeding. Jenkins's flight, he claimed, was self-preservation, not an admission of homicide. He painted himself as a thief, yes, but not a killer. Yet, the cigar butt found in Elias's office, a detail Elias detested, still lingers. What about the missing antique watch? These pieces don't align with a simple embezzlement turned murder. Jenkins's confession opened a door but didn't close the case. It added layers of complexity, leaving an unsettling question. Was Arthur Jenkins truly just an embezzler? Or was he a killer trying to compartmentalize his crimes? The evidence suggests one thing, his denial another. The complete truth, it seems, remains just out of reach. For now, the case file demands more. Always more.